Last week in part 1 of Proverbs, we began looking at the Proverbs by looking at them through subject categories because it's so hard. Like I said, it's like a series of Chinese fortune cookies. There's just random statements coming out of nowhere, unconnected to the next verse. And so we've decided to group them together for the course of our study under certain subject titles. But I want to begin by telling you about 4 theologians who went on a camping trip. And it was time to sleep, so one of the theologians said to the others, "Before you close your eyes tonight, look up at the sky and tell me what you see." And the first theologian spoke up and said, "I see billions of stars stretched over millions of galaxies. Yet of all the planets, only Earth can sustain life." The next theologian said, "That's great, but I see the massive expanse of space as evidence that God is infinite and we are, of course, finite. So we find our significance in the infinite's concern for the finite." Not to be outdone, the third theologian jumped in and said, "I see a night like former nights when my life was tortured with trouble and God was with me. And so when I look into the darkness of the sky, I'm reminded of those times in my life, and then the stars remind me of his faithfulness." And finally, the 3 men turned to the fellow who started the discussion and asked, "What do you see?" And he said, "Well, I see sky, which means somebody stole our tent." It's good to think high and holy thoughts, like the first 3 theologians did. But there's also a very practical side to life. And the Bible does address a lot of heady philosophical subjects like the meaning of life, but it also gets down to earth and uses language we can all understand as it discusses issues like money and kids and marriage and work and our words or speech or language or beauty, everything from occupation to temptation to conversation, the Bible discusses. And nowhere does the Bible get more practical like this than in the book of Proverbs. It was Mark Twain who once said, "Good decisions come from experience. Experience, though, comes from making bad decisions." And so experience is indeed the best teacher, but there are 2 types of experiences. There are your own experiences, and there are the experiences of others. Aren't we way better off if we learn from the bad experiences of others rather than have to go through the bad experience ourselves? And that is exactly what the book of Proverbs is about. It's a book of sayings, wisdom, that the wisest man who ever lived, given his gift of wisdom directly from God, was trying to teach to his sons. And he was trying to teach his sons, look, there are 2 types of experiences. Ones you go through yourself where you made your bed, you lay in it. Or where you watched how somebody else made their bed and you avoid doing it in that way. In other words, why attend classes in the School of Hard Knocks when you can learn from its graduates, right? Why learn the hard way? Be wise, not otherwise, he's trying to tell us in the book of Proverbs. And so, beginning in verse 4, I believe it is, in Proverbs chapter 1, these proverbs will give insight to the simple, knowledge and discernment to the young. Let the wise listen to these proverbs and become even wiser. Let those with understanding receive guidance by exploring the meaning in these proverbs and parables, the words of the wise and their riddles. So that's the goal of the Proverbs, to help us to become wise. That, by the way, was true of many of Jesus' parables. You know, he says here in the many of these proverbs and parables, Jesus' parables were just slippery enough to slide past the casual listener. In many of Jesus' parables, you had to really think and you had to dig to get the point. It took seriousness and a certain amount of discernment to grasp their real meaning. That's also true of the Proverbs. So as I said, we started last week by looking at subject matter and category, and we'll finish that same thing today by talking about friendship. Friendship wisdom is this next basic category. Like Irma Bombeck once said, a true friend is someone who thinks you're a good egg even though they know you're slightly cracked. A lot of truth to that. All of us know our friends are slightly cracked and we just play along like we are not. But let's look at just a few. This is speech wisdom. Am I in the wrong place? I am in the wrong place. I am not in the wrong place. I need to get over to the speech wisdom one. I had friendship wisdom. There you go, speech wisdom. The tongue has the power of life or death. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. And Proverbs 18:2 says, fools have no interest in understanding. They only want to air their own opinions. And Proverbs 12:18 says, the words of the reckless pierce like swords, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. All that matters to a fool is to spout out his opinion. All he wants is to be heard. He never bothers to stop and listen to you. That's what Proverbs 18:2 says. Fools have no interest in understanding. They're only interested in airing their own opinion, being heard. I love the tombstone that was found in England many, many years ago. It says, beneath this stone, a lump of clay, lies Arabella Young, who on the 21st of May began to hold her tongue. Apparently a new experience for her. But someday we're all going to have that experience. Well, we should beat that experience with reality in life. And one of the ways we do that is by guarding our speech, our tongue, and especially in this area now of gossip. Proverbs 20:19 says, a gossip betrays a confidence. So avoid anyone who talks too much. And Proverbs 18:8 says, the words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down to the inmost parts. It was Plato, the Greek philosopher, who said, wise men talk because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. You ever been around somebody they just had to be talking? They just had to be talking because they have to say something. Talk a lot and you get in trouble. The more you talk, the more likely it is you're going to say something wrong or to offend somebody. There's wisdom in being a man of few words. You remember the old poem that many of us learned in elementary school? The wise old owl sat on an oak. The more he saw, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why aren't we like that wise old bird? A lot of truth to that too. So, Proverbs 12:25 says, worry weighs a person down, and an encouraging word cheers a person up. Do you remember words that sliced through your spirit years ago? I'll bet you, if I could sit down with every single person in this room today individually and interview you and talk to you, I could say, what was something that was said to you years ago that still hurts you and you still remember? And you could say it almost word to word back to me. And you could tell me who it was. You could tell me when it was. You could tell me the setting. That's what some of these verses in speech wisdom in Proverbs are saying to us. You know, one of the dangers of gossip, I think that was on the last verse. Yeah, these verses, especially 18:8. One of the dangers of gossip is that once we start to get, it's just human nature in us. Now listen, it's just human nature in us. Once we start hearing it, we want to hear more of it, more about the story. We always crave more. It reminds me of the person who was gossiping about a friend to someone in church, and when the friend asked for more details, she said, "I've already told you more than I know." That's generally true with gossip. We sort of embellish it, tell more than we even know, creates more of a choice morsel that goes down to the inmost parts and becomes so harmful as a result. And so, worry weighs a person down, an encouraging word cheers a person up. Sort of reminded me of the song that we've often sung called Angry Words. The second verse of that has always been powerful to me when I was a young preacher. I'm talking about mid-20s. A lady sat in my office and quoted the words of the second verse to me as she was talking about what her husband had said to her. And it had been like an emotional spinal cord had been cut in their relationship with what he said and how he said it. And she then quoted back the words of this song that we had sung a week before in church. It says, "Love is much too pure and holy. Friendship is too sacred far for a moment's reckless folly, thus to desolate and mar. So just a moment's words can do that because they have such power and such impact." Speech wisdom. Rumors are dainty morsels that sink deep into one's heart. Proverbs 29:20, there is more hope for a fool than for someone who speaks without thinking. And Proverbs 18:13, spouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. I've never quite understood why people do that last one, why people spout off before listening to all the facts, and then they turn around looking like a fool. They turn around looking like somebody that is ignorant, frankly, and somebody embarrasses them, and usually that's the way they learn to stop doing it. And then there's this open mouth, insert foot disease that comes from spouting off from listening to the facts. Open mouth and insert foot disease, which most of us have had at some time or another. But Proverbs are also filled with pithy truths about positive words. So I didn't want to fall into the temptation here of just giving you the Proverbs that are about negative language, because our speech can do good things as well as do bad things. And I think sometimes we focus on the bad things that speech does. But the Proverbs are full of all good things speech can do as well. The words of the godly are a life-giving fountain. Think about, particularly in that day, but particularly in that day, a fountain was a source of water. And source of water was highly valuable, very important. And so words of the godly are like a life-giving fountain. Words of the wicked conceal violent intentions. Or like Proverbs 16:24, which says, kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. Honey was both a luxury and a medicine in ancient Israel. I mean, it wasn't like you go to the grocery store today and you go pick up a jar of honey anywhere. Honey was hard-earned and was a luxury. It was a sweetener. It was also a medicine. And so kind words, he said, are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. And then Proverbs 25:11 and 12 is a well-known verse dealing with speech. In fact, my parents for all of my life had in their living room, had on their table a book called Apples of Gold in Settings of Silver. And 40 years that they lived in that home, that book sat there. And it's a direct quote from Proverbs 25:11-12. Timely advice is lovely, like golden apples in a silver basket. To one who listens, valid criticism is like a gold earring or other gold jewelry. Now, you got to be the one that listens. Valid criticism or constructive criticism, no good at all, unless you are the one who listens. But to the one who listens, let me tell you, you've heard me say this kind of thing or something similar to it 100 times. 101 won't hurt you. You will learn things from your critics you will not learn from anybody else. You will. Some people just absolutely cast off any criticism they receive and turn their back on it without giving it any thought. That is not a wise thing to do. Valid criticism is like a gold earring or other gold jewelry. We all need valid, constructive criticism. Sometimes we won't get it from our best friends. They're afraid they'll hurt our feelings. They don't want any confrontation. Sometimes we won't get it from our spouse or our family for the same reasons, or they don't want to start some sort of an argument. And so sometimes you actually have to listen to people that you may not like very much in order to get information, a constructive or valid criticism that can be helpful in your life. So that verse is very powerful and important in Proverbs chapter 25. Proverbs gives us plenty of wisdom about taming the tongue. So let's just park there on it for just a moment. You know, the Quakers are well known for a saying that is filled with truth: never break the silence unless you can improve upon it. And it was Abraham Lincoln who was well known for saying, it's better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt. And there's a lot of truth that you could say that if Solomon had been writing 2,800 years later, he might have used these as proverbs. These are good examples of modern proverbs themselves. And so let's think about some more, thinking particularly about talking less. Proverbs 17:28 says, 16:31 says, if you listen to constructive criticism, you will be at home among the wise. Just what I was talking about a moment ago. Proverbs 19:20 says, get all the advice and instruction you can, so you will be wise the rest of your life. So when I was a youth minister, I did this with every youth group I ever had, and even some after I started preaching, I would go back down and do this, and I would say, look, the President of the United States can't do it all by himself. A governor can't do it all by himself. Has to have help. He needs all the advice and instruction he can. So a President of the United States has a cabinet, and the governor has a cabinet, and they have cabinet members in those cabinets that have particular areas of expertise, and they go to and get advice and instruction from them. And every teenager, I used to make them fill it out when I was a youth minister. I'd make them fill it out. You tell me the wisest person you know. Tell me the most prayerful person you know. Tell me the person you think knows the Bible better than anybody else that you could go to with any Bible question, they can answer it. Tell me the most caring, loving person you know. I had a form, had about 8 things, and I'd have them fill in the name of the person that they thought was the most in all 7 or 8 of those categories. And then I'd say, go to them and ask them to be a part of your Christian cabinet. And you can go to them for advice. None of them will turn you down. I guarantee you none of them will turn you down. They all want to help you. They all want to help you in your growth path as a teenager, as a young Christian. And so that's basically what 1920 is all about there. It's a good advice for adults too, by the way. But it's very good advice for teenagers and young adults. But the other speech wisdom would be what John Wooden once said: it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. Because sometimes people get into the mindset that they pretty well know it all. No, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. True story about a guy who was having a golf lesson with a renowned pro. And I mean, this pro was really good. $250 an hour to get a lesson with him. And each time the pro made a suggestion, the student had a better approach. And he said, well, thanks, but I think, shouldn't you do this? And the pro would just sort of grin and say, sure, and move on. At the end of the lesson, he charged, at the end of an hour, he charged the guy $250. And later, a friend that was along with the pro said, how can you take that money? You didn't teach him anything. And the pro said, I learned a long time ago it's a waste of time to sell answers to a man who wants to buy echoes. I learned a long time ago it's a waste of time to sell answers to a man who wants to buy echoes. So it's what you learn after you know it all that really counts. So speech wisdom is also encouraging other people and learning how to speak gently. Gentle words are a tree of life. A deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. And as verse 1 says, a gentle answer deflects anger, but harsh words makes tempers flare. Do you know you can say, I don't have the time, or I just go through a series of things here. Things that you can say that if you say them one way with a certain tone of voice and with a certain body language and a certain inflection, they will come out mean, negative, hostile, and you will not accomplish your purpose. You can say these same words in a different way, with a smile, with different body language, and with different tone and inflection, and have it interpreted completely different. That's what those two verses we're talking about there. Well, there we go. Boy, my thumb clamped down on the, there we go. That's what my thumb clamped down on the forward button, and there we went. But that's what those two verses there are talking about. I do it, whether you realize it or not, in preaching all the time. Just watch for it sometime. Just watch for it sometime. If I ever am making reference to hell or the eternal abode of the lost, I never shout and go, "You're going to hell and I'm glad of it." You know. No, if I ever have to make any reference to hell, I will simply smile and say, you know, the lost, God has described a place for them in the Bible. That Bible is described as a lake burning with sulfur and fire. Now those two ways of speaking are going to be interpreted two different ways. I could go through, do this in a language lesson some, I could go through dozens of examples of this in every area of our life: family, marriage, romance, children, every area of our life. And so of how that is true. So some of you probably are already aware that I say some very hard and difficult things, but I almost always say them with a smile or with a lowered voice. And if I'm going to raise a voice, it's usually about something exciting or good. A gentle answer deflects anger. Harsh words make tempers flare. Watch what you say, watch how you say it, and why you say it. A gossip goes around telling secrets, but those who are trustworthy can keep a confidence. And 16:28 says, a troublemaker plants seeds of strife. Gossip separates the best of friends. Or I love that modern proverb, a gossip is just a fool with a keen sense of rumor. It's a rumor rather than humor. Yeah. Okay, well, I thought it was good. I don't get everything right. Financial wisdom comes after speech wisdom. We've got a couple more verses on speech wisdom. Wrongdoers eagerly listen to gossip. Liars pay close attention to slander. And then the final on speech wisdom, avoiding a fight is a mark of honor. Only fools insist on quarreling. I want to get to financial wisdom because it's so important in today's time. where it seems like we just go literally from one financial crisis to another. Does it feel that way to you? Does it feel like way to you that since 2008, 2007, 2008, we just go from one financial crisis to another? And so that makes financial wisdom from the Word of God, I think, all the more important. It even makes what P.T. Barnum, the former circus leader, say important. Money is in some respects like fire. It is a very excellent servant, but a terrible master. When you have it mastering you, when interest is constantly piling up against you, it will keep you down in the worst kind of slavery. But let money work for you, and you have the most devoted servant in the world. That's so true. And Proverbs says so much about money. So let's look at what it has to say. Don't wear yourself out trying to get rich. Be wise enough to know when to quit. In the blink of an eye, wealth disappears, for it will sprout wings and fly away like an eagle. Proverbs 30, verses 8 and 9 have always been meaningful verses to me because I've lived it through my family. First, help me to never tell a lie. Second, give me neither poverty nor riches. First, give me enough to satisfy my needs, for if I grow rich, I may deny you and say, who is the Lord? And if I am too poor, I may steal and thus insult God's holy name. So, in my own family, my brother is an entrepreneur. He's brilliant. He's made $1 million or more 3 times in 3 totally different businesses. He grew up way more talented than me, could speak, could think, smart guy, and but ever since he made that first $1 million, he's been out of church. He doesn't care about spiritual matters at all. Oh, if I'm preaching somewhere close, he'll go, or occasionally he'll come down here and pop in if he's on his motorcycle, but he travels all over the world with his businesses. He's made money, lost it, made money, lost it, made money, seems now to be able to keep it. And he fits these verses just exactly. Fits these verses just exactly. So I understand exactly what Solomon's point is here. Give me just enough to satisfy my needs. If I have too much, I may say, who is the Lord? And if I don't have enough, I may be tempted to steal. I think a lot of people are in those categories myself. And then there's Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain, and your vats will overflow with good wine. But these are the 2 I really want to hone in on you. Just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. Now that was true 3,000 years ago when Solomon wrote it. It has been true every single day of those 3,000 years since, and it is true today. The borrower is always going to be the servant to the lender. We are seeing that play out heavily this week and last week in the bank crisis, and my prediction is you are going to hear a lot about this in the news over the next month in the banking crisis that is to come, as we continue to discourage local community banks from having money by not fully guaranteeing all of their investors and by fully guaranteeing the investors in the 5 or 6 big banks. Understand how dangerous this is. Weren't we just here 15 years ago? Wasn't that the crisis 15 years ago? And where we said these banks are too big to fail, so we have to bail them out? I mean, this financial wisdom that comes from the book of Proverbs was true 3,000 years ago. It's been true every day since, and it's true now. And then wealth from get-rich-quick schemes quickly disappears. Wealth from hard work grows over time. That is called The Magic of Compound Interest. I won't go through it again, but because a few weeks ago on Sunday morning, I talked about what I did in VBS last year with the kids, where I gave everybody a $1 bill and told them if they bring it back to me in a year, I'll turn it into a 20. And because I'm trying to teach them the importance of interest. And so this is one of the many verses in the Bible that relate to the magic of compound interest. The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. Have you ever looked at somebody and you know they've got plenty of income, but they always seem to never have any money? You ever know anybody? I mean, I know people like that because I know what their income is, and I know they've got plenty of income, but they always seem to have no money. And we think, what happened? As if it's some sort of great mystery. I think the mystery has been solved. Fools spend whatever they get. And that's a bad way to live, according to Solomon. It's always happened through history, happened in Bible times, still happens today, but it's not a good way to live. Now, I decided to call the last category lifestyle wisdom. Lifestyle wisdom. And there's a lot of it in the book of Proverbs. But two of my favorite verses I want to ask you to read aloud with me here. And there's a reason why I'm asking you to read aloud, is we know that reading something aloud helps inculcate it into your mind and into your heart. And these are two verses I want you to inculcate in your mind and heart today for a positive reason. So would you read with me? First, Proverbs 17:22. A cheerful heart is good medicine, but a broken spirit saps a person's strength. And then Proverbs 15:13, would you read with me? A glad heart makes a happy face, a broken heart crushes the spirit. On that last verse, can't you pretty well see that just about all the time? Can't you see it when you walk into your home? At the end of the day, can't you see it when you walk into school or to work? You can just about tell who's happy. You see it on their face, and you can just about read who's sad or has a crushed spirit. And that's the reason why. But I really want to hone in on the verse above that, because if there's anything we need to teach our young people today, it's this one. I am confused all the time about teenagers and young people today. They seem so anxious, so unhappy, so troubled. So many seem like they have a broken spirit. And that just makes me very sad, because this is a time of their life that they should have a cheerful heart and a lot of joy. And that will be a major part of their developmental process into becoming a happy adult. But you have to work at that. And it's like taking a good medicine. You know, if we were to tell our kids, we've got this medicine for you, it's going to make sure that you don't ever get diabetes. We've got this medicine for you, it's going to ensure that you will never have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We've got this medicine for you, it's going to ensure you will never have COVID. You will never have it. I'm sure our kids would all take it. Now we say, we've got this medicine for you that is going to ensure that you will be cheerful and joyful throughout your life. What is it? What is it? Give me the bottle. There it is. And it's true. It simply is true. Doctors have many, many times recorded the medicinal and healthy effects of a cheerful heart and a good laugh. But now that doesn't mean that's the only answer. I mean, there's an old story about a man who went to see his doctor. He was deeply troubled and disturbed man, very depressed. He awoke through the night, just about every night, sad, depressed. He was sinking lower and lower and lower until finally he decided, I got to go see the doctor. And he examined him from head to toe, and he said, physically, sir, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just depressed. But he said, I believe I know exactly what you need. I think I have an instant cure for your depression. And the man got excited and he said, what is it? The doctor said, there's a circus in town, and that circus is advertising the funniest comedian and clown in the world. His name is Grimaldi, and I went to that circus yesterday, and that fella had me laughing in the aisles and cracked up, and I went away feeling so great. I have never felt better in all my life. And I happen to have a front row ticket for tonight, and I want you to take it and go see that clown because I think it will help you cure your depression and get rid of your troubles. And the man suddenly just hung his head and began to cry, and the doctor said, now what's the matter? And the man said, doctor, there's something you don't understand. I am Grimaldi. So it's true that you can't always tell by the outward appearance of someone, but when you have a cheerful heart inwardly, it works. I'm going to close on the lifestyle wisdom by giving you my favorite verse in all the Bible. It was the verse that I preached on some time ago and wrote an entire book on it called What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. And I had gone to a Bill Gothard conference back in the 80s in Atlanta, Georgia, and he said, get a life verse. Get a verse that you repeat all the time that you're going to follow, that's going to be your verse, that is going to be the theme for your life, and let it guide you and everything. And so I looked and looked and looked for a while, discussed it with Diane and a couple of friends, spiritual friends, and I came up with trust in the Lord in all your heart and lean not to your own understanding. And all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your path straight, which is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And it has served me personally so well. And what great lifestyle wisdom this is. We're called to totally trust and completely commit. See, that word all there, that word all is probably the key. It is the same word that is used in Leviticus 6:22 to refer to an offering that was going to be burned up in its entirety. In other words, God doesn't want half-baked offerings or half-baked sacrifices. He wants us to be like offerings laid on the altar, giving ourselves without reservation to Him. That's all your heart. See, coming to church was never meant to be a hobby. Coming to church together with the family was never meant to be a pastime. A committed Christian should not be out of the ordinary. The norm for all of us should be trusting the Lord with all your own heart. And then not depending on your own understanding. I cannot tell you how many times in the past I've changed my mind. I've changed my mind. You know, I talked to somebody in the church not long ago and said, what is a doctrine? What is a belief? Something that you have changed your mind on in recent years? And he very defiantly said nothing. And I knew then I was talking to a closed-minded man. I absolutely knew I was talking to a closed-minded man. You can't study the Bible faithfully on a regular basis for years after years and think you were right on every single issue years and years and years and years ago. You can't do it. I mean, you've got to have some growth in your life. And one of the growths is you do not depend on your own understanding. Our own understanding is completely limited. It's trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge Him. That word all again, same one from Leviticus 6. And He will make your path straight. I love the old story of the chicken and the pig who were walking down the road together when they came to a sign in front of a building that said annual fundraiser, ham and egg breakfast. The chicken said to the pig, hey, that's right up our alley. Why don't we go in and help out? The pig said, well, that's easy for you to say, For you, that's just a contribution. For me, we're talking about a total commitment. And so the question for all of us to ask is, are we satisfied just making a contribution, or are we all in? Trust the Lord with all your heart. In all your ways, acknowledge Him. Are we all in commitment to Christ? Because God is really not looking for contributors. He is looking for committers.